Okay, we're good.
We're live?
Yep.
All right. Well, we're happy to meet together today for our final Doohickey paper. And we are sad that Brother Cochran couldn't join us today, but we understand he's a busy man as well. Per your instructions, Brother Cochran, we have provided and we have put together a PowerPoint presentation, and we each have that provided on our computer that we will follow along. Because we would like to interact with each other, and we've all become such good friends. We want to be able to see and interact. So we will be giving that PowerPoint to you through email communication. You won't be able to see it during our presentation today. Okay, so to begin, the opening of our Doohickey. Doohickeys You Need, Inc. is a small privately held company in Western Illinois that has never employed a human resource manager until now. In 3 previous papers, we identified and addressed several problems within the company, including solutions to how we would solve those problems. We now have identified 2 more key issues within the company and will be summarizing these issues and providing possible solutions. After addressing the final 2 problems, we would like to discuss as a group our individual thoughts of what we feel is the best problem for Doohickeys, as well as our personal recommendations for the human resource manager. The first problem we have identified today deals with organized labor. Our new HR manager believes she overheard workers mention that they are interested in forming a union. This isn't surprising since there are so many unhappy workers at Doohickeys. The second problem we will be discussing is the need for training in employment law, work at will rules, and how to handle seasonal layoffs. With that, Alicia, do you want to introduce our union?
Yeah, so this union that she overheard they were discussing or kind of playing with that idea. They said that the reason why they were kind of unhappy was because they had disagreements on overtime pay, on there's poor communication, unsafe work conditions, and low pay. And so if you look at the Doohickeys problem, you also see that there's this segregation between management and the factory workers. And with that, they say things like, factory workers don't understand anything, management doesn't listen to us, things like that. So the solutions for that we thought of, Jordan, Karen, and Mallory, and Jennifer have a little bit of solutions to those problems.
Okay, thanks, Alicia. So I identified a problem, or going off on what Alicia said as far as the mention of a union. We don't think that there's a need for a union with the Doohickeys. They just need to go forward with their approach of becoming more employee-friendly. Unions are typically formed to give the employees a voice in their workplace. So we recognize that unions have a place in some industries, but Doohickeys doesn't need one. Instead, they should strive to create a culture of union without a union. They can do this by creating an open door policy, fair workplace, and insist on open lines of communication. They need to be transparent with their intentions and listen to feedback. If they create an environment where employees feel confident to voice their concerns and suggestions to management, they would eliminate the need for a third-party intervention in the form of a formal union. We just don't think it's necessary in Doohickeys. So I'll turn that now over to Karen for her solution.
When we read the Adam Baxter negotiations of 1978, we identified reasons that the employees want a union, and some of those reasons are a guaranteed annual wage, an annual bonus, a no layoff policy, group incentive pay plans, and an open door policy. So we wanted to go to the employees and suggest a raise of $1 per hour beginning in the next quarter, which would put them slightly above the industry standard, to be paid overtime so that the company is compliant with FLSA. We felt that this would boost the employee morale as well as offering a 401k program. So the last item on the list is an open door policy. And a lot of times people feel like they need a union representative to, argue for them or fight for them if something's not fair. So we feel like going to the employees with these pay raises as well as the open door policy would make them feel like they might not need a union representative. representative to fight for them. They should be able to feel comfortable going in and asking for things on their own and being respected as employees and having an opinion. Mallory?
So as Alicia stated, segregation seems to be at an all-time high with Doohickeys, and it's a big problem is the pay. They don't agree on pay. Management feels they're paying too much for lazy employees, while the employees feel they're not getting paid enough and overtime isn't granted. And we feel that that's a huge part of the union wanting to be formed, is that they're not getting the pay they want. And we think that some solutions for this would be to communicate with the employees. If you're not getting the production you want and you feel that your employees are lazy, maybe it's time to talk to them about how to improve their production so that you don't feel like you're paying lazy employees and they're actually getting work done. And then just in hearing the employees out, we've mentioned this before, but employees want a voice where they work. And if they have a voice and they feel like they're heard, they aren't going to feel like they need to form a union, which is the reason of forming a union, is to have a voice. So we feel that if you hear the employees out and ask them to help make decisions regarding their jobs, that they will be less likely to form a union and be happier. So, Jennifer?
All right. So I feel like my solution also echoes some of what has already been said, but the bigger thing that I wanted to point out about the fact that we don't need a union is that the workers at Doohickey are not doing their job correctly. And it's difficult for the CEO to rally around his employees that he has at this point. We do understand from our Doohickey case that there is a lot of waste of product, that of actual raw material that they make their product out of, and there's so much waste that they're not producing what they should. And in Doohickey, he actually says, the CEO says that there are other factories that are producing more units with approximately 10% turnover, and you hear that the president is willing to pay more if the workers would just work harder and get more product out of the factory. So my opinion, instead of doing a union, my solution was that we need to have our new HR manager, who we in our own group lovingly coined her as Wanda Newjob. I believe that Wanda, what she should do is meet with the factory employees and gather input for a compensation plan that would correlate with their production. So if she can encourage them to produce more and get their ideas of what they would like to be compensated if they could up their production, and that would make them feel like they have a voice. She could turn around with their suggestions and present those to the CEO and the supervisors and the president of the company, because we know that there's money in the pot. And that reminds me of the Adam Baxter case. There was some money in the pot, but that factory that we had discussed in Adam Baxter had already been way overpaid compared to the other factories within the same company. So they needed to have a little give and take. And I feel like the give and take for Doohickey is that if they will produce more, then maybe the president will be happy to give them what they deserve if they will work harder. That way we don't need a union, because we can, if we're communicating, we can have their voice heard. And that was my solution.
That was good. Thanks. So moving on to the next problem that we identified, it was layoffs and dismissing employees. Currently, Wanda has the supervisor come up to her and say, "You have to fire John." And, Wanda asks, "Hey, what do you have supporting documentation? What seems to be the problem?" And in her face, the supervisor says, "This is an at-will state, and I can fire John for any reason." And he goes on to say, "I just don't like the way he dresses." Well, that is a problem. So in addition to that, on top of being told it's an at-will state, she's also told that they need to hire 10 new employees to meet the Christmas rush, but then they will have to lay off those 10 employees after Christmas. That's a lot for Wanda to take in on her fourth day. And so we came up with 4 possible solutions that will assist her in this situation and kind of guide her as she embarks on this problem that she's facing. So I will turn it over to Alicia for our first solution.
Okay, so with that problem with the CEO being able just to fire just because somebody dresses funny and things like that, because it's a at-will state. He does have a point. Illinois isn't an at-will state, so he actually could do something like that. But if the HR manager she can implement something called the common action of relatory discharge, and that helps kind of put a cap on like what this guy is able to do, or the reasons why he can fire someone. And so it helps it so what it does is they can only be fired for a work performance related reason, so the CEO can't just have complete control over who's hired and who's fired for just reasons, his own personal reasons. It has to be for work-related reasons. All right, so Jennifer is the next one.
All right, so the one I chose to focus on was the seasonal hiring. And in Doohickeys, this is how it reads. The supervisor also informs you that you must hire 10 more people in the next 2 weeks to support seasonal demand for the Christmas rush. After Christmas, you know you will have to lay off everyone you hire. And I actually, I disagree with that. I'm sorry, that is my phone. I disagree with the fact that she'll have to actually lay off, because if she can do the seasonal hiring correctly, then she doesn't have to worry about layoffs. The reason why that is working for her in her case is because of the WARN Act that was implemented in 1988. Stands for Workers Adjustment and Retraining Notification Act. It requires certain employers to provide notice to employees when a plant is closing or workforce reduction is proposed. The basic rule under the WARN Act is that employers must give 60 days written notice to affected employees or their representatives, as well as the state and local government. There is, however, an indication that we do not have to worry about layoffs, because it does say, if the WARN Act does not apply to a closing of a temporary facility or a closing or layoff resulting from the completion of a particular project or undertaking, if the affected employees were hired with the understanding that their employment was limited to the duration of the facility or the project or undertaking. So Wanda, at this point, will be tasked with hiring 10 new people, which she's worried about layoffs. But if she does her hiring correctly, there is no need to worry about that. Clear communication to the new employees during the hiring process will, and during their employment, will allow her to legally be able to hire the 10 they need, and then to let them go when the project. All right, and we are moving on to Karen. What did you find?
Okay, on her first day on the job, Wanda was told by a manager that someone was being insubordinate and that she needed to just fire him. And she asked if there was proper documentation. And the manager replied that it didn't matter, we're an at-will state, just get rid of him. So she realizes it's important to implement a dismissal process as well as an exit interview for employees who are fired. So the steps, I'm going to read the steps. Most of them are pretty self-explanatory. The first one would be to distribute an employee handbook, to document the violations, to enforce the disciplinary policy, to investigate before a termination, to know the law, to put the employee on notice, to handle termination with dignity, be brief and accurate, avoid sugarcoating, and to fulfill the requirements. So the last one, fulfilling the requirements, you need to communicate the legal requirements, including COBRA benefits, a final paycheck, unemployment options, and the transportability of their other insurance. And so it's not as easy as just handing someone a check or firing them. Normally you need to provide them with the check on the spot, as well as go over all of these other items with their insurance and COBRA. So not having all of these items in place means that someone can turn around and come after you later for additional pay. You know, if you were to fire them on the spot and not get them the pay within the required amount of time, then you would end up in the long run paying them for each additional day. So you kind of need to have this plan set up, and as the HR manager, know what the plan is and how to handle things legally. Mallory?
All right. So although Illinois is an at-will state, I don't feel that it's beneficial for the company, for the manager to just hire and fire without a proper process or consideration. They already have a really, really, really high turnover rate for their industry, and I feel like just hiring and firing who you please, just because you think they don't dress the way you want them to or things like that, it's not going to create a safe work environment for other employees. They're not going to feel like, because they could be fired for anything, and they are going to be worried about that, and nobody wants to work in an environment where they feel that they could get fired for something that has nothing to do with how they are working. And so we feel that it's important to implement a process where if you are going to fire somebody, even though Illinois is an at-will state, just realize that it's important that the underlying issue of the letting go be something regarding their actual work. Maybe they aren't doing all that they can, or maybe they really are lazy. And if they don't, maybe implement a process of warning and letting them know, hey, you're not producing as much as you should, and you're not working as hard as you should, and we're watching you, and if you don't pick it up, then maybe you will be let go. And things like that, where they don't just feel like, okay, this guy fired me because he doesn't like my pants. So I think it's important to implement a process where when you let somebody go, it's for a real reason that is based on their work. So.
Excellent. All right. With our remaining time, what we had decided to do was to each pick what we felt over the course of the semester have learned of the different problems of doohickeys, and what we felt was the most important problem, and what our solution would be for that problem. And so without further ado, we would like to have Alicia start off the review of what she felt was the most serious problem at doohickeys.
Okay, what I'm seeing, in my opinion, what the biggest thing was the lack of diversity in the company. I thought it was really weird how it was 90% of managers were middle-class white males, and they were somehow related to each other. That they were all kind of hired from the CEO, like from kind of his friend group. And then I just think that how we can fix that problem is they were talking about creating equal opportunities from current employees, like giving them opportunities to move up. Then also having like anti-discrimination laws, like making sure that there's people from different backgrounds and different places that are kind of giving their input, as well as have meetings so then people are aware of like how Doohickeys is looking at the moment, how the company's doing at the moment, and how they can improve in, I don't know, recruiting processes or things like that. So that was mine. Jennifer, what about you? What do you think?
I felt like the biggest problem was the lack of compliance with the sexual harassment laws. And especially if poor Wanda New Job got this in this time, in this day and age, then it would be a hot topic, because it's a hot topic all around our country right now. She had been notified when she was very first on the job that there was a sexual harassment issue currently happening that had been ongoing for a year. And so my opinion is that she needs to rectify that lack of policy and training right away. Sexual harassment does fall under Title VII. And due to what we have read in the Doohickey case, her harassment would be considered an ongoing hostile work environment, and Doohickeys could be held liable for that, for their workers' actions and what's been going on. So what I suggest she does, because what we know about Title VII, I suggest that they immediately remove the offenders to another area of the factory, or that they find themselves under suspension after a quick review. They face organizational liability if they don't control the work conditions, and if action isn't taken to prevent or correct this undesired behavior of these men. We also know from, excuse me, we also know from our Doohickey case that they do not have any sexual harassment policy, nor has anybody been trained about sexual harassment. So she needs to jump on that quickly after she decides to either suspend or move the offenders to a different part of the factory. In order to do that, she either needs to organize a sexual harassment training herself, or she can quickly find one that they can hire out. My opinion is that she needs to provide an online training. I have a quote here from Kim Peterson and Ellen McCleary that conducted research on the effectiveness of online harassment trainings. It says, the computer-based training lasts 1.5 to 2 hours and consisted of 5 components: introduction, sexual harassment definitions, points of view, handling sexual harassment, and a comprehensive test. It was based against an instructor-led training that was the same length, and essentially post-training cognitive and skill-based learning scores between the 2 identical tests did not differ significantly by the training delivery method. So I feel like an online training which gives adequate training to her workers will be her best course of action, because she can then quickly get the employees trained and free up her time to write the sexual harassment policy that they do not currently have. All right, who's next?
That's me.
All right, Jordan.
So the biggest problem that I think, I also agree with Jennifer that sexual harassment is a huge thing, but in identifying a different key issue, I think that the fact that their employees are bored and unmotivated is a big problem. When employees aren't motivated, they don't want to do their work. There's a lot of waste happening that we were told about. The turnover is high. People just don't want to work at Doohickeys. It's not a good environment. And so when employees are leaving, you have to devote time and money to training new employees. You have to spend the money looking for new employees. It just, when you have this unmotivated workforce and the turnover rate, it's just not good for business. And I'm assuming Doohickeys wants to continue to be in business, so they need to figure out how to motivate their employees so that they will want to come to work and do a good job. So in our reading this semester, we read a Harvard Business Review entitled "One More Time, How Do You Motivate Employees?" And in this article, we learned how to enrich the employees' jobs. Doohickeys the new manager should really spend some time reviewing that article, but I pulled out a couple different suggestions that I think would be key for them to start on, and then maybe focus on a couple of the smaller items as they go along and kind of fine tune their process. The first thing I would say, what I would suggest, is that they need to hold the employees accountable by removing some of the control that management, I'm really sorry, that the management is in control of right now. I think when you allow employees to be accountable, oftentimes their work ethic goes up quite a bit. You should also allow them to create processes that will enable them to do their job better. If they're in charge of creating the process of how things are accomplished, it gives them a sense of accomplishment, and it also enables them to perform their job better, since they are emotionally and invested in the process. You should also allow them to work on harder tasks, something that they may have never come across before. That gives them a feeling of being needed and wanted, and allowing them to go kind of achieve in their own role. And then also let them learn and become scholars of new technology or new products, ways to put something together. All of those things, when combined, allow employees to feel valued and give them opportunities to excel and learn new things. And when that happens, they're motivated and they want to come to work. And so I feel like they need to do that and focus on that, as well as the other things we've talked about. So now I will turn it over to Karen for her analysis.
Okay, so I just wanted to touch upon the career and development training. In the story, it stated that the HR manager received no formal new hire training, and on the first day of the job, she was told she would just be shown the bathroom and introduced to the gang. So the new employees have been at a disadvantage starting to work at Doohickeys. They're unfamiliar with the environment and company procedures, and without any type of formal orientation, they feel overwhelmed and they may not continue with the job, which, as Jordan had touched on, then they quit, and it just starts this cycle that becomes very expensive. Their turnover rate is 50%, and the industry average is 10%. So we wanted to start more of a formal process, a new hire process, and we've outlined it on the slides. I'm not going to read each one just for the essence of time. The second thing I wanted to touch upon was the training for the employees after they're hired on. Training can improve business performance, profit, and staff morale. So as the new manager observed, it was clear that everyone was doing things differently. The tasks were being done in different ways, and so some were yielding better results than others. This was also costing Doohickeys time and money, and it was raising the overall production cost. So the process for the new formal training program is also outlined on the slides, and this one I will read. We want to identify the employees who are most productive, develop a written training program, assemble a training team, implement weekly lunch and learns, and show production results to the employees as they improve. And we feel like by following these steps, it will help to show the employees the positive results of following the new training program. Mallory?
All right. So for the biggest problem, in my opinion, with Doohickeys is their high turnover rate. And I think that the high turnover rate incorporates pretty much every problem at Doohickeys, just because everything can contribute to that high turnover rate. I think some of them, excuse me, the main issues would be the lack of benefits and pay. The employees aren't getting paid overtime correctly. They don't feel that they're getting paid the right amount. And then there's no options for the current employees or no opportunities for them to advance into management or even higher positions than they currently hold, being that management is chosen by the CEO and it's his friends and to do with work or performance, anything like that. And then because of that, there's no real camaraderie within the workplace. People just come to work and they do their job, and nobody even does their job the same as anybody else. They probably don't have much communication, and they just go to work and that's it. So I feel that it's important to, like Karen said, incorporate training so that everyone's doing the same job the same way. And I think it's also important to create opportunities for the employees to work up, or not necessarily to management, but to just feel like they can succeed in the workplace. Because it's one thing to have a job and just know that no matter what, you can never work up. But there is opportunities within this workplace to do that. So I feel that they should be offered to employees that are currently working there. And then I think the last thing would be to implement a mentoring program. We talked about this in one of the cases for this semester, and I think that it can create lasting relationships within the workplace, and that can develop the sense of camaraderie where people have friends and the workplace is just more of a fun environment. Not that it needs to be fun, but just where people want to come to work. Management complains that there's lazy employees, and maybe if they had friends and they felt responsible to those friends, they would put in more effort and it would be a better workplace. So that's it.
Excellent. Okay, Brother Cochran, we hope you enjoyed our discussion. We actually are much more lively in our others, but I'm sure you're aware of that if you watch them. But we appreciated this opportunity to present Doohickeys to you in this way, and we hope you enjoyed it. Thank you.